The vision of Greenwich United Way is to ensure that every member of our community has the opportunity to be healthy, educated, and self-sufficient. Today's legislative breakfast allows for our elected officials to share their work and what they're doing in Greenwich as it relates to human services needs. As you may notice from the 149th District, we have both outgoing State Representative Rachel Khanna and incoming State Rep Tina Korpis. I want to share some House rules so that we're all clear on the format this morning. Everyone will have the same amount of time to answer a designated question. We ask our elected leaders not to interrupt anyone else while they are speaking. And importantly, to stick to the allotted time, we have about an hour and 15 minutes slated for the conversation this morning, and we will try to cover as much as we can. Rob is sitting in the front row. He'll give a wave to you. He will let you know how much time is left. And for the audience, if there's a topic or question that isn't answered in the formal portion of the program, feel free to chat afterward, or of course to reach out, to call, email, however you'd like to reach the elected leaders. Today's questions, you should know, are solicited from the community and were shared with Greenwich United Way regarding the topics most pressing in Greenwich. So we'll begin with introductions. We'll just start from left to right. Ryan Fazio. If you could please introduce yourself. Yes, please.
Sorry, we're having very important negotiations. My name is Ryan Fazio. I've had the privilege of representing Greenwich, Stamford, and New Canaan since 2021, so I'll be going into my third term, second full term. I sit on the Energy and Technology Committee, where I'm the ranking member. I sit on the Planning and Development Committee, the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, where I will be the ranking member, and the Transportation Committee. Representing this town has been the honor of a lifetime. I'm proud of some of the work I've been able to do on behalf of our town and state, and I'm very eager to get back to work in January to continue to try to bring people together and most importantly solve the problems that face our state, to reduce the cost of living and ensure that there's upward mobility. The work that you all do, everyone in this room, that the Greenwich United Way does, is so important to making this community whole, to improving the lot for people who are in need. And so I think on behalf of everyone on the dais, we really thank you for your work, and we're always here to work with you to make the lives of the people that you serve better.
Hector Arzeno.
Good morning, and thank you to the United Way for organizing this breakfast, and all of you for being here with us today. I am Hector Arzeno. I am the state representative for the 151st District, and I serve, that includes parts of Coscope, Central Greenwich, Riverside, and Old Greenwich. Currently, I am a member of the Education, Environment, and Higher Education and Employment Committees. Next year, I am planning to be a member of the Education, Environment, and Transportation Committees. Also, I am a member of the Early Childhood Care and Education Caucus, the Moderate Caucus, the Black, Puerto Rican, and Latino Caucus, the Reproductive Rights Caucus, and a member of the subcommittee that wrote the Connecticut Climate Bill this year. So I am very proud to be with you and serving Greenwich in Hartford. Thank you.
Tina Korpis.
I'm Tina Korpis. I'm representative-elect for the 149th District, which serves Pemberwick, Glenville, the Backcountry, North Stamford, and Westover. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and thank you for the honor and responsibility of serving this amazing town. I am new to this role. I will be sworn in on January 8th. I spent 2 decades in corporate law and investment banking, and then ran 2 nonprofit organizations. So I care deeply about the nonprofit community in this town and in general. I have requested my committees, and those requests have been driven by the issues that my district constituents said were most important to them. So I've requested appropriations because the budget will be a big issue this year. I've requested planning and development because local control of zoning, I heard loud and clear from my constituents, is a big issue. And I also, I heard a lot about balance in government and integrity of our government. So I've requested to be on government administration and elections, and I will find out next week. Thank you.
Rachel Khanna.
Thank you, Dimitra. Thank you to the United Way for organizing this breakfast. It's a pleasure to be here this year. And thank you all for being here and for the work that you do. I'm Rachel Khanna. I'm the state representative for the 149th District. And I can say that for the next 36 days. But it's been a true honor to serve. And please don't worry, you haven't seen the last of me. Seriously, though, I serve on the Appropriations, Transportation, and Government Administration and Elections Committees. And while I won't be in the legislature in the coming session, I will stay involved in the community and look forward to supporting and collaborating with all of you so that you can get your needs met. Thank you.
Steve Meskers.
Yes, so I'm Steve Meskers, the 150th District. I cover from the border with Stamford to the border with Port Chester, pretty much the post road to the water for our district. I served for, this will be my 4th term, so I want to thank you all for your continued support in the electoral process. So I've served 6 years. When I complete this, it'll be 8 years of service at the end of the 2-year term. I sit this year on commerce, on insurance, and on regulations and rules, right? Those are the 3 committees I'm most focused on. I think in service, I've reached out to most of you at different times of the year. I've received individual requests. I've worked to bring back money to the town. I'm pretty happy at what we've accomplished over particularly the last 2 years, and certainly over the last 4 years now that I've been up there and I know my way around the building.
And Fred Camillo.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you to the United Way for hosting this again, for you all to be here to listen and to ask questions. I've been blessed to serve my hometown in many different capacities on many boards, committees, commissions, task forces. For 11 years, I was a state rep in the 151st District. So I sat up here with my colleagues in a different role for many, many years. And I'm in my 3rd term now as first selectman. And do still serve on lots of different boards and committees and things like that. So, and I work with the delegation and the people, stakeholders on the state level all the time with lots of issues, including things that deal with human services. So I look forward to the forum today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we'll get straight into our first question. We're just going to go down the line the other way. So we'll start with you, Mr. Camillo. The question is, what are some human services, health, education, self-sufficiency, that you're directly involved with, whether specific nonprofits or within the town and its agencies? And how are you looking to strengthen your work with local nonprofits to provide these services?
Thank you. That's a 30,000-foot question. I mean, it's we're involved in a lot of things, whether as a legislator or as a first selectman. Whether it's the Commission on Aging, some of the organizations like Jewish Family Services, the Knights of Columbus, Neighbor to Neighbor, all touch on all human services, and also there's the individual component of it. That's what you probably don't see or read in the paper, but those are the calls you get every day. And you work with the various agencies and departments, and Department of Human Services is a leader in that, to address things. And you're always looking how you can strengthen it. We speak all the time, and I tell all of the nonprofits to let us know when you're doing something that the public needs to know. We get it out there on the weekly e-blast that I put out on Fridays. We also put it on social media. We're on 4 different sites now, which is pretty good because we do reach a lot of people. I get messages all the time on social media with a lot of human services questions. So it's more, again, doing that and continuing the communications with the state on lots of things. So that's it.
Thank you so much. And I neglected to say this is a 2-minute answer, so you'll have more time for this one. Mr. Meskers.
So the question is, what are some human services, health, education, self-sufficiency that you're directly involved with in nonprofits? That's a very comprehensive question. I can't think of one of the human services or nonprofits in town that we haven't worked with directly over the course of the 8 years that I've been involved. My first involvement, or my deepest involvement, probably happened in the midst of the COVID crisis, and those were individual problems and reaching out to individuals. It was dealing particularly with the food insecurity issues, with unemployment benefits, with insurance problems that people had, and it was dealing in all of those issues. Subsequent to that, I've worked. I think I got dragged in by Hector into the the Boy Scouts, and in their aid that we provided to them. I worked very closely with the Boys and Girls Club, helping to raise funds for their rebuilding of their project. Neighbor to Neighbor with funding for them, and various other groups. I've worked to bring in the resources to the town to provide us with the ability to do that. I would say that. This isn't part of the question, but how do we work and strengthen that? I would focus on human services in town as one of the places to go through. We basically answer directly to our electorate. We speak to the town through the First Selectman's office and through our human services to figure out what the needs are. We try to coordinate that. We try to balance how to bring resources to the town. We try to make sure we are fair and helpful and uplifting our residents. So that's been my goal and my focus over the last 8 years.
Thank you. Ms. Khanna?
Thank you. Prior to being a state representative, I served on the board of Kids in Crisis, and I was on the PTA while my children were at Parkway School. I also served on the representative town meeting for 2 terms, and in addition to serving on the appointments and land use committees, I was the District 10 representative on the Community Development Advisory Committee, and we reviewed the Community Development Block Grant Allocation Program, which is an important program. It's an annual grant program that funds our municipal and area nonprofit organizations for the purpose of addressing the needs of the local community. And I think that was probably the most rewarding and fulfilling part of my time on the RTM. I have volunteered and continue to volunteer with many human services nonprofits such as Kids in Crisis, Filling in the Blanks, and I support many organizations in towns such as Ableist, the Greenwich Alliance for Education, Family Centers, the Greenwich YWCA, and many more. And I also want to add that I've done a lot of 5Ks for these organizations. And over the last 2 years as state representative, I, along with Steve and Hector, were strong advocates for many of the organizations in town and worked hard to secure significant funding for, as Steve mentioned, the Greenwich Boys and Girls Club, the Greenwich Alliance for Education, Family Centers, Parsonage Cottage, River House. And helping people has been the thing that I've loved the most about the job, both organizations and individuals. And I'm looking forward to continuing to support the work of all of these organizations and more, and doing lots more 5Ks. Thank you.
Thank you. Tina Corpus.
As a private citizen, the nonprofits with which I've been most closely affiliated are the YWCA, which is a mission near and dear to my heart. I was executive director of the Permanent Commission on the Status of Women in Connecticut, which is a bipartisan nonprofit with a 50-year legacy of advocating for Connecticut's women and girls. And obviously the work of the PCSW dovetailed with the work of the YWCA. I consider Mary Lee Kiernan to be a mentor and friend, and I do believe that particularly the domestic violence services will continue to be an interest of mine. I've also been involved in scouting because I have 2 scouts, 1 Eagle Scout and 1 hopefully on the way. And he's already here. Hopefully he's on the way to becoming Eagle. He's 15. Doma's Kids, which is an organization in Stamford, which does comprise part of my district, which supports at-risk youth in all of the non-academic barriers to advancing their trajectory in education. So those have been my personal interests. In this role, I am getting up a learning curve. So nonprofits have been extraordinarily helpful to me because while the social services provided by the government are monolithic and anonymous, although I believe it's my role to help bridge that gap for this town and for my constituents in Stamford, the needs that you all address are immediate, personal, you know the community better, so I feel I have a lot to learn from you about how to get things done at the state level that serve us best. So I've been spending time with nonprofits, and I ask you to please, I would love to meet you today and set up a time to tour your facility and get to know what you do. We can also spread the word. as legislators about things you're doing in the community. We can advance your legislative priorities. And I do want to say, I believe that I have a very, nonprofits are going to carry some weight in the next few years, given the budgetary crisis we have in Hartford. So I believe it's incumbent upon us to support nonprofits to fill gaps that I think may be coming. Thank you.
Mr. Arzeno.
Thank you. I am a member of the RTM on my third term, District 8, my district, and I am a delegate to the Finance Committee. Also, I am on the board of Barbara House and have close links to family centers. And I indirectly had been involved with probably all, if not most of the nonprofits in our districts. I think in the next point, we will cover very much what we had been doing with many of you, including the United Way. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Fazio.
In the recent past, I've volunteered as a driver for 3 years for Meals on Wheels. I've actually been involved in the community investment process for Greenwich United Way and looking forward to doing it again in the coming year. And I spent 7 years as a volunteer tutor in inner city schools. So the cause of Greenwich United Way actually is very close to my heart, things related to upward mobility and giving everyone access to the American dream and a chance to reach the middle class. I think one of the most valuable abilities that we have as elected officials is the ability to listen. And the most powerful resource we have is many of you leaders across our community who inform us of the job we need to do, the priorities we need to have, and the needs of our community. So in the coming 2 years, just like the past 3, it's a priority of mine to meet with and listen to as many leaders in the community who are doing the hard work, as Tina said, on the ground in a personal manner, of trying to connect people who are in need with the resources that they need to make their lives better. So it's always going to be a priority of mine, and I think a lot of my colleagues, to meet with you, learn from you, and do our best to make public policy align with the goals that we all share of creating access and opportunity for every citizen in our community and in our state.
Thank you. We have one more question for all of the officials on the dais, and it has to do with affordability. CTUW released its latest ALICE report for 2024. It shows 13% more state residents, or roughly an additional 65,000 households since 2019, are struggling to make ends meet despite being employed and still not earning enough to cover the basic cost of living. Who are you working with, and how do you plan to address this? We'll mix it up this time. Ms. Khanna.
Yeah, we know that the ALICE numbers throughout our state have been increasing, and I can speak for my colleagues when I say that we've worked hard to secure funds for organizations that serve residents who are struggling to make ends meet despite being employed. I also advocated for free school meals and funding for early childhood education programs. In the 2023 legislative session, I voted to use ARPA funds to provide free school breakfasts for all students and free school meals to students eligible for free and reduced lunch for the school year. Many of you who know me know that food and nutrition are very important to me, and this is something near and dear to my heart. There are many households that aren't eligible for income-based assistance for whom a free lunch can make a tremendous difference. For those families, relieving the burden of providing meals and offering the peace of mind that their child will eat is impactful. So I think this is something very important. We need to remove the stigma for children who need meal assistance. School is hard enough without having to deal with the additional pressures of either being hungry or having to ask for help. I've also been a strong advocate for early childhood education programs, and we need to make sure that we fund these programs, because investing in early childcare yields so many dividends, not just putting children on a path to academic success, but it creates jobs in childcare. It frees up women to enter the workforce. And currently, there's a 20% gender gap in employment for parents of young children. So that is something really important that we need to focus on. I was recently, on Tuesday, I was at a forum on early childhood education, and Beth Bai, the Commissioner of the Office of Early Childhood, mentioned that children who have access to early learning and preschool programs have 22% more income later in life, and the benefits are multi-generational. So the U.S. loses about $20 billion a year because of the lack of childcare, and Connecticut loses roughly $1.5 billion per year. So really, this is an important issue that we need to start addressing, and I hope that the legislature will continue to address this in the coming session.
Thank you. Tina Corpus.
Affordability is definitely an issue in our state, and I heard this very loudly on the campaign trail because we were the summer of the electric bill kind of fiasco, and I think that on the list of immediate things that need to be addressed to give relief to working people who are trying to make ends meet are figuring out how to take the public benefits portion of our electric bills out of our electric bills and put it into the budget where it can be balanced against other priorities, and at least people can feel that if they're being taxed, which that is what that is, they're being represented. I also think that we should explore the child care tax deduction, again, in the realm of immediate relief for people that are trying to make ends meet. Secondly, as I dig into the budget, which I do plan to work on through Appropriations Committee, we have grown our public sector significantly. Our pay in the public sector, the size of our public sector, it is important to have a robust public sector, but there is no two ways about it. That is coming on the backs of tax-paying people who are already overburdened in the state of Connecticut. So while it sounds like a macro cop-out answer, I actually think it is the answer. We have to change the structure of how we do our budget in Connecticut so that we take burdens off of working people and we shrink our public sector to a more reasonable size. Finally, with respect to affordability, I think we can't ignore the fact that we have a very robust philanthropic community here, especially in Greenwich, and we have to make policies which balance, again, the ability to retain people so that we have not only robust financial resources to support nonprofits, but the robust talent that we all benefit from, both in the incredible staff we have, the incredible board members we have, et cetera. So that sector can't be ignored either.
Mr. Arzeno.
Thank you. During the last two sessions in Hartford, the current state delegation with Representative Metzger-Santana, and in the case of the Boys and Girls Club, with the support also of Senator Fazio, we obtained a $6.5 million bonding for the reconstruction of the new Boys and Girls Club in Greenwich, including Camp Simmons. If I recall, Steve, a $42 million project. In addition, the three state representatives, Metzger-Santana and myself, obtained financial support for the Boy Scouts of America, as they are known today, for the reconstruction of a bridge at Camp Seaton, Barbara House, for the renovation of their fleet of buses, Greenwich Alliance for Education, supporting their work in the AVID program, plus financial support to one student, two different students in each year, 2023 and 2024, for a scholarship in college. Parsonage Cottage for the renovation of the roof, just finished. The River House Adult Daycare Center to support the work with our seniors. Family Center for the First in Education program. The Greenwich Library for the replacement of one elevator. Wage Free Greenwich for the composting program at New Lebanon School. And United Way for the free and reduced price meals programs at the Greenwich Public Schools. Important to mention that United Way does not charge any cost or overhead to this grant. It went directly to the public schools for families that for some kind of technicality do not qualify as Alice families. However, they have difficulties making ends meet. So that had been our involvement, and that's what we have been doing to help our communities in Greenwich. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Meskers.
Well, I can't do another recap of what we've done so far. I would say that we continue to support our nonprofits in every way we can. When they reach out to us, we try to answer in the quickest and most efficacious way possible. In my role on commerce, this past year, we created an incubator program for early childhood education for home health care. for early childhood education. We worked diligently to try to foster the support. I think I will echo what Rachel said, that early childhood education, closing the achievement gap, providing structural support for our youth is of prime importance. The affordability issue facing the state is not an affordable issue unique to the state. Income distribution in the United States is somewhat compromised. The growth of the economy is a primary issue, and that's why I sit as chair of commerce. It's to grow the economy, to lift people out, and provide the opportunities for people to grow their livelihoods. Last year, one of our measures was we created a fund, or we created a line item for early childhood education. We yet have to dedicate the resources to it. When we look at the lack of early childhood education or the affordability of early childhood education, it's a drag both on the economy and it's a drag on the individual families. The cost of early childhood education is exorbitant. We see that in their commentaries about our education budgets, et cetera. We've got to look to see what we can do to continue to support families who need our support to provide dual incomes and be able to go out and work and not lose their benefits. And this is very important. Right now, what we face and what I would like us to take up again, because it didn't make it through the session, is a study of the benefits cliffs, where you go to zero on benefits over a certain dollar amount of income. And it's very, I think it holds back people in their aspirations for their future. So I'd be looking to see us do something there as well.
Thank you. Mr. Fazio.
The cost of living in this state is unreasonably high. We have the second highest taxes in the country, the third highest energy rates in the country, and every year it seems like healthcare costs go up and up with no end in sight. And I do think that state policy bears some responsibility for those high costs. The high cost of living is a regressive tax. It especially affects the middle class and working class families. Every year I put in dozens of proposals and bills that would ameliorate that high cost of living and make it affordable and help our economy grow. We haven't actually added any net new jobs in this state since the year 2000, which is a shocking statistic, especially when you consider that a full-time job is the ticket to the middle class and out of poverty for people in need. We need to reduce those sky-high energy bills. 2 years ago, I wrote a proposal that included taking public benefits out of the electricity bill, which is a cumulative cost of over $500 million statewide. That's about $400 for the average household, or $500 for the average household in Connecticut of a hidden tax. And there's several other proposals I've made and I will make every year until I'm finally heard that will actually reduce energy bills. We need to reform and reduce the tax burden in our state. We could take out some of the special interest deductions and carve-outs in the tax code, broaden the tax base, and reduce income taxes by about $2,000 for the average household in this district, and maybe $1,000 for the average household statewide. We need to cap property taxes, which is a very regressive tax, which artificially increases the cost of housing. It might not be as high in this town as in other towns, but it is really inhibitive of economic growth in other parts of the state, and we need to do more to reduce healthcare costs. That's going to be a top priority for me this term as well, in bipartisan fashion, making sure that there's more access and less cost with more competition to the benefit of patients and consumers. There is so much more we need to do to reduce the cost of living in this state, and it's going to be a top priority for me over the next 2 years on the Energy Committee, on the Finance Committee, and others.
Thank you. And on the issue of affordability in the town of Greenwich, Mr. Camillo.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Senator Fazio, for getting that singled out on the bill so people can see in a transparent way how their bills are affected, and it does hurt people. When I was in the legislature for 11 years, I would always try and bring people back from both sides of the aisle and people in our office to deal with getting them to know about the asset-limited and income-constrained and employed segment of our society. And that's why we were able to 3 times get the $24 million back in the budget for New Lebanon School. The Republican delegation did that when the Democratic governor took it out of the budget 3 times, and The reason was because our Democratic colleagues supported us, and that was because we had made the case that Greenwich is a very diverse place, and we did that from a minority position. So it's all about communication. And then on a personal level, Greenwich resident Joe Calico and I started what was called Needs Clearinghouse, and originally it was to get keep government out of things and match people up who have needs with those who have the wherewithal to meet the needs. It went a little bit beyond that. We started raising money and got people who needed eye operations done. We had vans donated to organizations that needed it from here to Bridgeport and beyond. So we did all that, but today we could still use the same answer from the first question. All these wonderful organizations here, the YMCA. I hate to say, a 54-year history with the Greenwich Boys and Girls Club. It wasn't the Girls Club then. And have several meetings with them on helping them with their issues. And I neglected to mention Barbara's House. Gabby Ratner's just tremendous, always reaching out and asking how we can help. And that's how things get done. People reach out to us, usually first, or something we see. So I thank Gabby and everybody else that does that, because it certainly makes our job a lot more clear.
Thank you. Well, we've heard a lot about early childhood education this morning, so we're going to stick with that issue. The state is looking to make early childhood education more accessible and more affordable. So we want to ask now, what are you doing specifically locally to help Greenwich families? We'll start with you, Mr. Arzano.
Thank you. I would say that this is a priority for the governor for this coming session and for many of us at the House of Representatives and I'm sure at the Senate. I serve also in the Early Childhood Caucus, as I mentioned before, and in this regard, we have seen not only in the last two sessions, but in the past few years, an increase in the Care for Kids program and in the School Readiness program. Certainly, this coming session, it would be a challenging one, but with challenges, there are opportunities. Working together with the Connecticut Early Childhood Alliance, we are looking for options to find a more robustly formed to support the needs of the young children and providers. They are very much advanced. Probably over the next few weeks, we will know more about what they are proposing for this session. But I am optimistic that we will be seeing action during this current coming session for early childhood education. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Corpus, if you can tell us about your plans.
This is an issue near and dear to my heart as a working mother of 4 children. And when I ran the PCSW, we did a study on the impact of COVID-19 on Connecticut's women, the economic impact. And it was a house of cards falling on the daycare and early childhood situation. Home daycares closed because of COVID restrictions. Facility daycares closed because of COVID restrictions. Because most of those facilities were run by women, those women lost their incomes. Because women make, as Representative Khanna said, 84 cents on the dollar in Connecticut, when a family was deciding who would stay home with the kids who were not in school, it was the woman who would typically step out of the workforce, and typically at the worst time possible for her career trajectory. If you have little kids and you're in your between 30 and 40, you need to be doing this in your career, but that's the acute time for childcare needs. So those women were stepping out of the workforce. Needless to say, when I read this Alice report and saw the huge part of household survival budgets that's consumed by childcare, it just confirmed that acute situation still exists. The things we can do, I think, we have the strictest childcare restrictions in terms of level of certification that childcare professionals need to attain in Connecticut. Obviously, we want qualified people to take care of our kids, but I think that burden may be too heavy and an impediment to capacity. Licensing requirements in childcare facilities, I think, are overly onerous, and we need to carefully examine whether we should roll those back. And finally, there's a TRI-SHARE program that was piloted at the state level in Michigan and North Carolina, which combined It's a cost-sharing program between the state, employers, and employees, which has been successful in those two states. We've piloted it in New London here in the state of Connecticut, and we should look at it as a viable option to creating additional capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we've talked about affordability a bit. We're going to dig into that issue some more. We want to ask, what are you doing to increase affordable housing stock with local control in Greenwich? Let's start with you, Mr. Camillo.
Sure. Well, number one, working with Greenwich Communities is our biggest weapon to get to 10%, the mandate that was put on us in 1991. The law hasn't worked. 26 or 28 communities have gotten it out of 169 in 34 years, so it hasn't worked. So our role is twofold. While we have to defend every single year against bills that would strip local control coming out of the legislature, we also have to show what we're doing. And as I mentioned, Greenwich Communities has done a great job getting us up from 5.2% to 5.8% in the last few years. We got to get to 10%, and there are plans in the works right now that would get us probably close to 7% when the current projects are done. We also have the Greenwich Housing Trust Fund, which was originally tried in 1988, and it was defeated in the RTM. We got it done a couple of years ago. That will hopefully help us, get the ball down the field a little bit more. But also, I meet all the time with the representatives over at the Housing Authority, and I try to identify individual tracts of land and properties that they can look to. That doesn't add impervious surface and add to our flooding problem. The houses are already there. They fit right in to the neighborhoods, and they've been doing that. So it's not just building new things. It's also seeing what's out there and also improving what we have. If you've been by Armstrong Court, I can't stop bragging about it. How my grandmother lived there, and I spent many nights there as a kid, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. We didn't know we thought affordable housing was supposed to look like that in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, but it looks pretty cool now. And it's not only getting to that 10%, but doing so in a way that the people living there can be very proud of it. And I think that's always has to be the goal.
Thank you. Mr. Meskers.
I neglected to mention that I've sat on the RTM for 20 years. And in my role at the RTM, we passed the bill for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I'm a strong supporter of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, putting funds there, potentially with transfer taxes, et cetera, to see if we can find a way to raise the funds to support our community's efforts to maintain local control and grow our housing stock. I think the housing stock in the town, we would like to see it grow, but obviously under local control. So the best way to defend on local control is to present our own credible plans up at the state. We continue to support local control. I've never voted against our local control. We passed a bill in the last session, in the House at least, and that was to allow for transit-oriented development at the option of the town. We are providing the town with as many options as humanly possible. We're trying to provide the town with resources, and certainly as it stands with Greenwich Communities, as they apply for funding from the federal and state government, they can count on the support of the delegation to allow the Greenwich Communities to do its work.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Fazio.
I think, well, first of all, I'm very proud of my record defending local control and home rule in our state. I think there is a lot we can do to improve housing access and affordability while putting our localities, our communities in the driver's seat. And that's always the platform I've stood on. This next 2 years will be a very important and at the same time is a very uncertain time for this issue, because I think at the same time that there is so much risk of us losing even more local control as a town, there is also opportunity to find compromise, bring people together in a way that we can both protect local input while at the same time improving housing access and affordability. Every year, I put forward bipartisan legislation to change 830G in a manner that I think both respects local input, but also will increase our affordable housing stock in this state. the current state law is adversarial by nature. I think by creating a more agreeable situation between the state and the localities, we can achieve the goals that we need on housing while doing so with our towns and cities in the driver's seat. So counting all forms of affordable housing, not just deed-restricted housing and government housing in our state's calculation. If you give credit for something, you encourage more of something. It's the more discrete form of affordable housing rather than the kind of, giant, large-scale development that I think people in this town want. Both from an economic standpoint and from the standpoint of a town character and current scope. So my goal this term is, first of all, to say no to the one-size-fits-all proposals, but also to reform 830G and reform state law in a manner that encourages more of the discrete, naturally occurring affordable housing, as well as the middle housing and the workforce housing that isn't currently supported under our state laws for our nurses, our firefighters, our teacher, people on lower to middle incomes who do not qualify for the current government housing. That means more accessory dwelling units, more residential and mixed use areas, and so on and so forth. There is a lot of opportunity on this front. At the same time, there's a lot of risk. So we need to stand strong at the same time we try to forge a compromise that balances all of these very important interests.
Thank you so much. Someone had mentioned earlier child tax credit, and I want to take the conversation back there. A fully refundable Connecticut child tax credit at $600 per child we believe would help reduce child poverty, boost the economy, and promote equity. Would you be in favor of this Connecticut child tax credit? And if so, what could you do to support the policy? Let's start with you, Mr. Meskars.
There have been a number of studies about the refundable tax credit, talking about how it ultimately reduces the level of poverty, provides families with resources for early childhood education, et cetera. The demands in the state are such that I'm conflicted on the early childhood, the child tax credit versus early childhood education, where I would like to see the resources first put to a more dedicated and focused support of early childhood education, both to close the achievement gap and provide the resources for working families to get back to work. I'm not sure that we can do both within the current tax year, and that'll be one of the questions we have to look forward to, which is the most efficacious way to provide opportunity to lift people out of poverty. Is it with an individual check to each of the families with a child, or is it to the state resources that we need for early childhood education? And I'm not on the committee. I'm willing to hear the debate, and I'm wrestling with the issue to see which way I go on it.
Thank you. Ms. Cano, your thoughts?
Thank you. The expansion of the child tax credit during COVID cut child poverty in half, and it was one of the most effective tools ever for this purpose and helped so many families and children. At the same time, we know that the 2025 budget process is going to be difficult, and there have been calls from some to be more flexible with the fiscal guardrails. However, these guardrails are there for a reason, and they're working. They've allowed us to pay down $8 billion in our pension liabilities, which is saving us $700 million a year, and is expected to save taxpayers $18 billion over the next 25 years. I won't be there, but as is typical in any legislative process, legislators are going to need to find a balance to make sure that we continue to abide by our fiscal guardrails while also addressing the needs of the state's residents. And as Steve just said, we need to find the most efficacious way to allocate our resources.
Thank you. Mr. Fazio.
I'm open to a child tax deduction, which would offset some of the biases in the tax code against parents and families with children that naturally exist, and it probably would be better off at the federal level in order to more directly offset those biases that exist. A refundable child tax credit would mean that if you do not work, or if you don't work much, that you would be entitled to a payment even if you didn't have a tax liability. I think that is more problematic. There has been a lot of economic literature, including a recent study out of the University of Chicago, which said that if the federally refunded child tax credit from the COVID era was made permanent, that it would result in 1.5 million parents permanently or equivalent permanently leaving the labor force, which is a problem because we all know, as we discussed earlier, that full-time work is the key to the middle class and out of poverty. The poverty rate among people working full-time, regardless of wage, is 2% compared to the nationwide average of 12%. So I think there are very important policy reforms that need to be undertaken in the state to make it more affordable to raise a family, to increase upward mobility. I think that a fully refundable CTC will actually be counterproductive to those goals. So a better alternative would be something like a child tax deduction, among the other reforms we talked about to reduce the cost of childcare. Tina described them very well. There was a blue ribbon panel that was commissioned, and the reforms have not been since undertaken, even though I think a couple of the recommendations were very good. And then everything else we need to do to lower the cost of living and improve economic growth and opportunity in the state.
Ms. Corpus, do you want to follow that up?
I'll be brief because I agree with both what Steve and Ryan said. I do think a child tax deduction is a more moderate, small step to take. That is, it's not a check written by the state government to individuals. It's a deduction of their, it's a deduction of what they're paying in taxes. So it's a deduction of the revenue. And then if we have fewer revenues coming from fewer taxes, that has to be baked into our balanced budget. So I think it's more prudent fiscally. I also agree with Steve, too, because the question here is, where do we get the biggest bang for our buck? Is it that we want to alleviate the costs of children being here and all of their day-to-day expenses, or is it that we want to provide a path for the children to be the most productive and the families to have the best path forward? So I'm new to this, and I plan to learn as much as possible and listen to the debate as this very important question is considered.
Mr. Arzeno, your thoughts?
Thank you. The answer is yes, I am in favor. We are the only state in the country that having a state income tax does not have a child tax credit of some form. We all know, and we mentioned, we all agree on the advantages that that brought to families before. Certainly, we have the limitation of the financial guardrails, among others, the spending cap specifically. On the other hand, we have excess revenues in the states that certainly is helping us to build the reserves of the rainy fund, to fund our unfunded liabilities and to pay down our debt. However, the implementation of a child tax credit with all the proven benefits that we all mention and agree that had in the past is not any violation of financial guardrails that we have. We will have to find a balance in the next session between the plans that we have for early childhood education, the child tax credit. Somehow we'll have to find. But as I said before, when there are challenges, there are opportunities, and we'll be working hard for all of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's swing now to another stage of life and talk about our seniors. How are you supporting seniors in our community? And we're specifically asking about the high cost of medication, affordable housing, and specific medical services. Let's start with you, Mr. Camillo.
Thank you. The last few years, Greenwich has, I believe, the first in the state became the first age-friendly and dementia-friendly town with a designation, with those designations. And in addition to that, continuing to support tax abatements for seniors, which started a couple decades ago, I think when I was on the RTM. I think it was just upped a little bit recently. But also getting seniors to know that it's okay to take that tax abatement. My late Aunt Jenny would never take it. I don't know why. She looked at it as a handout, and I would tell her it's not a handout. You've worked here, you've paid your taxes, you've volunteered, and she just wouldn't do it. So I think getting them to know that it's okay to take it is helpful. As far as affordability with housing, I had a bill in Hartford that got a public hearing. It didn't get passed. That would have allowed seniors to stay in their homes by allowing them to rent out more rooms to different people and expand the categories of who could rent out there. But it didn't pass. But it got a public hearing, and hopefully that is an idea that will be resurrected up there. And I've had lots of conversations with Ryan and Steve Meskers. Not Stephen, too, I guess. Steve's fine. About their efforts up there in Hartford. I know Ryan on the affordability with housing, and Steve's done good work on the cost of medicine. I know you focused on that right away, and it's appreciated by so many people. So continuing to do that and work with our stakeholders on the state level to just to keep that front and center for our seniors. We're all going to get there one day, and just letting the seniors know that it's okay to take anything that's there because they earned it. They worked hard for it.
Thank you. Mr. Meskers.
Medicine is the most, I'm sitting on the insurance committee, I can't think of anything worse to have engaged in the discussion on medicine in the United States of America. And it's not a state problem, it's a federal problem. We have decided as a country to provide the world with medicines at a cost of about 3 to 4 times what it costs the rest of the world. And I'm not talking about poverty-stricken areas of the world. Basically, the average cost of medicines, if you go back and look at the United States, the Ways and Means reports, I think of 2019 or 2021, we pay about 3 or 4 times what developed Europe pays for its drugs. Now, our drug industry, our developments, our science is incredible. But the question is, what is the premium we're willing to do to support that industry? If I was sitting here at the federal level, I would tell you that the solution is to guarantee our pharmaceutical industries a 30 or 40% profit on top of what they charge in the rest of the developed world to do their research, development, and production in the United States. But the costs at 3 or 4 times are making medicines and healthcare unaffordable. I've sat for a long time on the insurance committee wrestling with the project. We're compounding our costs of healthcare at about 7% a year. That means if you're in the private sector and you have healthcare insurance, you can expect it to double every roughly 7 years. It's going to become unaffordable. That's a problem that we can't solve at the local level. But what we can do is we can try to regulate the cost of insulin, but that basically passes the costs around to different groups and pools the risk, but it doesn't really reduce the costs overall. We've got to figure out how we handle healthcare costs in the United States. They are careening out of control, but it's a federal issue. On the rest of the affordability issues or supporting our seniors, I've been a strong supporter of Parsonage Cottage. In the last go-round, we raised funds from the state for the redo of the roof of the senior center or the assisted living at Parsonage Cottage. You can continue to see our support for our seniors there. We also raised money for River House, the adult daycare. And apart from that, you can count on our ongoing support to our seniors. Where I differ at some point is I think one of the gems that we have in the town is our town-owned nursing home, the Nathaniel Witherall. It costs us somewhere between $2 and $4 million or $5 million a year in subsidies to support it. But if you look at the facility versus a lot of facilities around the country that are for profit, it becomes a problem in the quality of care. So I differ with some of the people on my support for the Nathaniel Witherall because I think our seniors who've paid into our town forever should have a dignified place for their end-of-life care. And that's one of the places where, I'm not going to drive that bus, but I'm sitting on the RTM and I will be supporting that.
Thank you. And Mr. Fazio.
In my first year on the in the Senate, I was the ranking member of the Aging Committee. Maybe they thought if they put the youngest senator as the ranking member of the Aging Committee that they could reverse it. But But we were able to pass in bipartisan fashion some positive reforms to strengthen penalties on exploitative crimes against the elderly. People in my family suffered from that, and it was enraging. And so I think that was important work. But there is a lot more that the state needs to do to make things affordable, to improve quality of life for our older citizens. We need to improve healthcare access and reduce the healthcare costs. As Steve said, most of the problems related to drugs are of federal variety. I would support, more Democrats support it than Republicans, but I would support potentially drug importation. But on the healthcare provision front, there is a lot more the state needs to do to reform its regulations, to improve access. We need to reform the certificate of need system, which creates a almost on average 300-day permission slip waiting process for existing providers of healthcare to expand services in this state. That is nuts. We should be rolling out the red carpet for providers who want to expand services, not making them jump through so many hoops that it costs potentially millions of dollars and a full year of delays. It's unconscionable. We should improve reciprocity of licensing for healthcare workers. So if healthcare workers want to come into this state to work, it's easier for them to do so, not harder. We should reduce the licensing fees that are annually paid by those healthcare workers who are licensed and qualified. They're higher here than I think anywhere in the country, about $550 or $600 per year just for the right to work in this state. I mean, this is nonsense. There's so much we can do to improve healthcare access, reduce costs, and guess what? We still need to reduce those energy bills. We still need to cap property taxes in this state and reduce the unfunded mandates on our towns and cities that really hurts seniors, especially in other towns who have higher property taxes, and forces them to move out of the state. We want to make it easier to retire here than anywhere else in the country, not harder. So those are some of the reforms among many that we need to employ to improve quality of life for those in retirement.
Thank you so much. Well, now we want to go behind the scenes a little bit in your offices regarding human services and ask, how do you get feedback from your constituents and how do you act on them? We're asking if you can share any specific success stories or areas of improvement based on the community feedback that you get. Mr. Arzeno, we'll start with you.
Thank you. We have many examples. I see Alan here. I mean, we are in touch with him constantly on requirements for ADA compliance and needs and many others. And one example comes to my mind that we can mention that our elderly population and residents in Greenwich are the most affected ones with telephone internet scams. And so what we did is we organized a forum at the Greenwich Library that was very well attended by all of our seniors, and we brought the Attorney General, William Tong, to explain, and we did it together with also the police department, to explain the most common ones and to identify them, how to react, and as I said, well attended, and we did several of those during the year, and that's an example of what we have done. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Corpus, this is a forward-looking question for you. Tell us about how you plan to get feedback and answer that call.
This is a great question, and I just met with my our campaign team last night to figure this out. How do you open lines of communication with your constituents? I've had several excellent bosses in my life, but I'm suddenly aware that I've just stepped into a job where I have 18,000 bosses, and how do you appropriately take on that responsibility? So I think there are a few things. Staying directly connected to constituents. I got excellent. The only way I really learned what constituents wanted was talking to them directly, going door to door, being in the community. So that will definitely continue. People have, I've gotten 2 excellent ideas for bills that I plan to propose, one from a business that we visited on our 50 small businesses in the district tour, and one that came directly from a constituent that emailed me that told me something I didn't have any idea about our election process. So keeping those lines of communication open. are extremely important. And then the nonprofits, I really plan to sit down with both police chiefs because I want to know what they need in the public safety area. I would love to sit down with each of you because I don't know what I don't know. So you all do about the constituents you serve. So it's both appealing to people individually and to learning from the aggregators and leaders in our community.
Thank you. And Mr. Camillo.
Well, thank you. Before I answer that, I just wanted to acknowledge that the good folks from Pathways walked in, and they do a great job here in town, led by our former First Selectman Peter Tessie. It's often overlooked, but it grows more and more important each passing year. How do you get the feedback? The normal ways, but I give my phone number out every Friday morning. People think I'm crazy on the radio, but it's a way for people to get to me because our town email gets bombarded. Janet's laughing, but it gets bombarded, so I don't want to miss anything. So I will give my cell number out. What I found also is the weekly e-blast we send out, the community connections on Friday morning. People will respond, and sometimes it's not even about anything in there. It's the chance that they have to say something to you, and so I found that's been really, really important. We all here have taken lots of calls and are very proud of being able to help somebody. That's why we do what we do. But my favorite story was my kindergarten teacher, Ruth Wilson, who's going to be celebrating, I think, her 107th birthday this year in Greenwich. She was overbilled by one of the utilities. And it was, I don't know, it was like $10,000. They said, we'll give you, we'll pay over in a 5-year period. And this was a couple of years ago. I think she was about 101 then. And she says, I may not be here then. And so I called them up and I said, come on, that's ridiculous. And they laughed and they sent her. And she was so happy. I mean, she bragged all over COSCOB that we got it there. But it was funny because I don't think they really thought about her age and that, we'll pay it in the next 5 years. But she's still here. God bless her. But I think we all share those types of stories, and it's why we do what we do.
Who's laughing now? That's a great story. Thank you. We want to ask about what you're working on in terms of new partnerships for funding initiatives planned to support human services in Greenwich. So what plans are in the works? What can you tell us or update us on? Let's start with you, Mr. Fazio.
So one of the important budget debates over the last decade has been how to most effectively use taxpayer monies to support the vital needs that our communities have, especially people who are most in need. And unfortunately, in that time period, the nonprofits of our state, including in this area, have been given short shrift. They've seen the most budget cuts in the last decade compared to other sectors, especially the public sector, which continues to see pay raises in excess of what private sector workers get. And one of the problems with that is that our nonprofits and human service agencies are able to deliver great services to people in need at a lower cost than the government itself is. And so it's my belief that if we leverage our human services, our nonprofit sector, that we're going to be able to deliver more services to people in need across our town and across our state at a lower cost and therefore make the most impact possible. So I think in future budgets that our nonprofits, funding for our nonprofits should be prioritized compared to other needs in government because of the effectiveness and because it's able to do the same job or a better job at a fraction of the cost of the public sector. So that needs to be part of our future budget discussions. And then beyond that, I know my colleagues and I always have an open door. So, in the process of these budget negotiations, we can prioritize needs here in Greenwich for some of the vital services that you all provide. And we'll do that through different grants, helping you navigate those through the budget process and potential line items, as well as any bonding requests that need to be made. So that's the approach that we'll take for the coming years. But generally speaking, the nonprofits in our state need to be prioritized, not pushed to the corner in future budgets. That will accrue to the benefit of everybody in our town and state.
Thank you. Mr. Meskers.
I'd have to agree with what Ryan said in terms of the priorities of our nonprofits going forward. I think it's a super important focus for us to deliver the needs and the funding to our nonprofits so they can help to continue the good work they do in this town and throughout the state. In terms of the partnerships, I think we have partnered with almost all of the groups in this room in conversations and in planning and in funding. What am I planning? I'm planning to be the receptacle for a number of requests in the course of the next 3 months as we build out the budget to figure out what the capital needs are from the groups. So specific plans on the state level, my support of early childhood education, I'm really looking to lean in on that. On the issues of supporting our nonprofits, I'm looking to lean in on that. Closing the achievement gap and providing the funding through town services for those issues that the town decides they want funded, which requires us to have the appropriate level of planning and requests. So whether they be for ADA accessibility, whether they be for our seniors, whether they be for our early childhood programs, you can count on my ongoing support. Those requests, some of them will come directly from you, some of them will come through Human Services, but my door has always been open to that.
Thank you. And Mr. Camillo.
The Office of the First Selectman appointed the Department of Human Services as the administrators of the opioid settlement funds to distribute to organizations like Kids in Crisis. It's a multi-year payout, so will allow our nonprofits to fund, help fund mental addiction and mental health issues that some of the residents are experiencing. As far as also in this coming budget, last year I had put in a position for a grants writer to look for things that would be helpful to the town and to the various organizations. It added headcount, so it wasn't well received. So we're going to try something different this year and put it in as a consultant, so it doesn't add to headcount. You can judge by the end of the year, you paid out X to get Y. Right, and you could see what they brought in. It doesn't add to the headcount. It doesn't add. There's no benefits there. So I think a couple towns we spoke to have done that, and they like it. So hopefully that will pass this year. That's an opportunity to help with human service needs. Also, as far as partnerships, we're always working on that. I have a meeting in a couple days with the mayor of New Jersey City, who's offered to help us with some childhood cancer initiatives, and so you're always constantly looking for partnerships, and we have them here in Connecticut, but also beyond.
Thank you so much. Our final question, and everyone on the dais will have an opportunity to answer, is about future growth. What long-term strategies are in place to enhance and diversify the human services provided in Greenwich? We'll just go left to right. Mr. Fazio, we'll start with you.
The answer to that, I think, is similar to the last question. It's a few different strategies. First, listen. Our doors are always open. We're always here to listen and to support you in any way possible. And I think that's the most effective way to lead. It's by listening and understanding the community, their needs, and what needs to be prioritized. This is a great town. It's a big and diverse town with a lot of different needs that many people in Hartford aren't even aware of. I think they're actually becoming more aware of how diverse the town is, how much need there is in the town over time. But that's a requirement on us to communicate and also understand what the needs of this community are. And then we also need to, again, from the last question, we need to leverage our nonprofit sector as boots on the ground, as the most responsive agents in our community to the needs that we have in the state budget, in the state economy, because you're more flexible, you're more efficient, and you are the eyes and ears serving the people and understanding the needs that our community feels most of all. So our state needs to prioritize you, prioritize the tip of the spear in the fight for upward mobility and improving the lot of everyone in our community. And we as leaders always need to have an open door, always need to be listening and watching and understanding what the top priorities that our community has are and how to solve them.
Thank you. Mr. Arzano.
Thank you very much. Well, I certainly agree with Ryan and with Steve on what we had been seeing, and this will require teamwork, consistency, continuity, and leadership. And we defined for the last two sessions 3 priorities for Greenwich. Number 1, to obtain the maximum possible reimbursement for the construction of a new central middle school. To maximize the use of construction grants available to Greenwich, example, the Glenville Corridor and pedestrian safety programs, and the use of bonding grants available to nonprofits focusing on children and our seniors. For the next session, I believe that, and we mentioned in general, but we will be focusing, Rachel can start working on that, on the YWCA renovation and expansion program. We want to obtain the bonding for that, and we will be fully supporting that. That will be a priority for the next budget session that we will be all working on. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Corpus.
I'll just be brief because we've talked about a number of these. I think part of it is creating more opportunity to lift people out of poverty so their demand for human services decreases, alleviating costs on the middle-class working Alice families who are trying to make ends meet. And finally, what do we, when the state allocates $100 to a human service through the government, what do we get back for that? I'm really interested in the transparency of what we're doing as a state and whether it's working. Could that $100 or $100,000 be better deployed in the hands of a nonprofit? People that own businesses know that you're always trying, it's always a trade-off, an opportunity cost. This $100, would it be better served here or there? And I really think we need more transparency in whether our state programs are working or whether we should make a priority allocation to nonprofits to perform the same services cheaper and more effectively. So I hope and plan to work on that. Thank you.
Ms. Khanna.
Having served as a state representative for the past 2 years, I was able to see how strong and effective our nonprofits here in town are. That said, we know that public needs and requests for their services are going to continue increasing. So we need to make sure that these organizations have the resources they need to continue to do the important work they do. I also think many of these nonprofits are going to will need to get very creative in order to leverage as many partnerships as possible to get the resources they need. Legislators listen and will advocate for nonprofits. So I urge you to communicate your needs because legislators hear of grant opportunities and can advocate for nonprofits through the budget process. And I also urge you to testify during public hearings and ask allies and supporters like me to testify and advocate for you as well.
Thank you. Mr. Meskers.
I think the most important thing we do in our long-term goals is listen to the public, listen to the agencies, listen to the nonprofits in town, figure out their goals, their objectives, and try to winnow through those to see which of those are fundable, achievable, and that we can help and add to the efforts that you engage in. I'll make an observation that I think at some level through both the Office of First Selectman and Human Services, it would probably be good to work on the mandates of each of the individual nonprofits. There's a lot of mission creep, as I see in some of the nonprofits, and that I think it's helpful to coordinate our resources and to be able to deal, whether it be addiction, mental health, various other endeavors, that we can figure out how we can best leverage the dollars, the scarce dollars we have in the state, to target the nonprofits that are singularly focused on those efforts. And it's harder when it's a broad-based group. With the Boys and Girls Club, it's obviously an easy lift in that they're taking our youth and educating them. With the Boy Scouts, it's obviously the Scouting America, it's obviously what they do. With the YWCA and YMCA, there's pretty much the same type of focus. But each of the groups, as we get better understanding of the focus, we can leverage our funding and make sure that we dedicate it to the right and appropriate areas.
Thank you. And the final word is with you, Mr. Camillo.
Thank you. Thank you again, everybody, for coming here. I'll be final and brief. When you listen, you learn, and when you learn, you can lead. And I think that's pretty much what Ryan said. We listen to you and we advocate for you. We testify on your behalf. In 2008, one of the first things when I first ran for the legislature, that was one of the first issues when I was talking with the nonprofits. I realized they do it a lot better than government does it. And I would hope that we continue to push for that and allow the local nonprofits who have their boots on the ground, as you've heard, who know the issues a lot better than well-intentioned people in a far distant capital. So continue doing what you're doing. Greenwich cares. I mean, this is an early morning meeting, and look at the crowd here, right? We always don't get crowds like this, even at 10 o'clock in the morning. So Greenwich cares, and it will always continue caring as long as good people like you are here. So again, thank you all for being here. Thank you to United Way for hosting this, and God bless.
Our sincere thanks to all of you on the dais for your time, your energy, and your thoughts, and to all of you for being in the audience today. And lastly, we just want to let you know to find out more about Greenwich United Way. Our CEO, David Rabin, is here. He'll give a wave. And we urge you to stay and have conversation, questions, say hello, and of course, reach out to him if you have questions about grants in the community or any programming that focuses on human services needs. Thank you and have a great day.